Is in place. Hello everyone. We welcome you all to yet another talk in IPN colloquium. As we realized a bit later that this also falls in a stretch of a long list of holidays. So, but anyways, nonetheless, we decided to go ahead with it. And today we have Priya Sharma from TAPMI, Bangalore, who works both on anthropology and philosophy, and she teaches there both on the anthropological aspects and the philosophical aspects. She tries to combine all of this. So we have her presenting on a very important and interesting topic, which aligns quite nicely on applied ethics. That is the way to characterize it. So her, just a minute, I'm digging up the title. The title of the talk is Whose Ethos? A Case of Indian Surrogacy Law and Its Moral Bedrock. So, Priya, we usually have like say 40 to 50 minutes of presentation, and after that we open it up for discussion. So, shall we start if you are fine with it?
Yes. So,
yes. And we can keep it all of this flexible.
Okay. So thank you, Varun, for the invitation. Thank you everyone at IPN, and thank you also for presenting it for me, like the slides, because I've not been able to do that to another device that I was on. So as Varun said, the title of this today's presentation is Whose Ethos? A Case of Indian Surrogacy Law and Its Moral Bedrock. So this is the title of one of the latest works that has come out from my doctoral work. I finished my doctoral work in 2023 from IIT Bombay. After that, I was a postdoc fellow there before I joined TAPMI Bengaluru as an assistant professor in October last year. So this work, like this particular title that you see here is a title of the work that has just come out like 19 days back in a Routledge companion to gender and reproduction. So the chapter there is titled such, and I'll tell you how and why why this term whose ethos got into my work. So just to give a brief outline, Varun, can you just move to the next slide?
Yes.
Yes. So as I said, it is based on my doctoral work, wherein what I do is I look at surrogacy policy in India. Surrogacy is a part of an assisted reproductive technology. And the entire gamut of that, it's an arrangement within that. I'm sure all of you would know that already. So what India has done recently is ban commercial surrogacy, wherein the surrogates were being paid to carry the child for someone else. And that was the form of surrogacy in India for the longest time. So it's a very interesting fact that how when the first IVF baby was born in late 1970s, and everyone know about that, everyone knows about that Louis Brown, and the name is, at least for the ones who are working on reproductive ethics and technology, might know about this. That around 1978, the first IVF baby was born, and it was a big thing. But what many people don't know is the fact that in the same year, in fact, within a span of just a few days, the first IVF baby was born in India as well. And that fact has been, buried in the history of reproductive technology in India for the longest time. I also got to know about it while I was presenting once at AIMS for an ICMR conference. And that's when I realized that one of the orations was put on the name of a particular doctor from Bengal, and that's when I got to know Subhashish Mukherjee, that he was actually the first person in India, very near, in the same year, to have accomplished that. And sadly, because of again that question, whose ethos, right? Because the then government thought it doesn't go with our ethos of Indian culture. He was not supported. He was actually shifted to an I department, and later this has a tragic end. He committed suicide. But now his contribution has been resurrected. So I was part of this ICMR conference in AIMS around reproductive health a few years back, and there is an oration on his name, and like now it's a common knowledge that he was one of the contributors. I just wanted to point that out. That's what I always try to do whenever I present anywhere. But in terms of surrogacy, India was one of the leading players till 2015, when Indian government banned first the foreigners from coming to India, which were the largest clientele. And then recently in 2021, it has banned like everyone from availing availing commercial surrogacy, where a woman could be paid for her surrogacy services. Now, what the form of surrogacy that is allowed is only altruistic surrogacy, and that is what my research is around. I look at this move and what it does through care ethics. So I begin with this one. Let's go to the next thing. Thanks, Varun. So I begin with this one anecdote. So my research, given I come from an anthropological and philosophical background, in fact, I entered philosophy very late in my life during my MPhil and PhD. That's when I was introduced to feminist philosophy by Professor Amrita Banerjee, who was my one of the supervisors in PhD in IIT Bombay. So my entry into philosophy is quite late. So my work has a lot of empirical component embedded in it. And that is something that I've seen in care ethics, actually in other parts of the world as well, because there's not a lot of work on care ethics in India. But what I've seen abroad is that empirical work has been mainstay of care ethics, even by the philosophers there. So I actually have a paper on navigating the identity of someone who is rooted in anthropology, but also philosophy, and how it is, when I do philosophical work, I'm always questioned on then why empirical, and when I do empirical work, I'm mostly questioned on why it's so much conceptual work. So I kind of navigating that interdisciplinary position is something that I have actually written about also. That's another interesting piece for some time later. But that is the reason that you'll see a lot of field-based work in my research. So this is one anecdote wherein there was this young boy who had come to meet his mother, Zisha, who was acting as a surrogate mother this is one of the most famous hospitals in India. And I have put this name, like, of course, the surrogate's name is a pseudonym on her request, but the name of the hospital is real because the doctor who runs it, Dr. Naina Patel, had like no qualms with it. Like, she actually herself told me that you please put the name. A lot has been written about me already, so I don't really care. So the name of the hospital is real. This is one of the hospitals that put Indian surrogacy on the global map, because this doctor also appeared on Oprah Winfrey's show and was one of the main doctors to whom a lot of people from abroad would come to. So I met this one surrogate there, and while discussing about what she's doing and, like the law that the government is trying to bring. So it was all around 2017 when I had just finished. It was towards the end of my MPhil that I was on the field here. And I was speaking to her son. So I was speaking to her, and then her son also happened to be there, who had come to meet Disha, because in India, mostly surrogates usually stay back in the hospitals for the 9 months period, or in adjoining, surrogacy residential spaces, owing to one stigma that is associated with surrogacy, but also owing to the fact that doctors also find it better to surveil them. So there is a lot of ethical issues there as well. But Risha was one of the women who was very happy staying in that hospital. So that hospital, Akanksha Hospital, in its basement, it had converted the basement into a surrogacy hostel, what it used to call. And I met Zisha there, and it was a Sunday. I think it was around, it might be a weekend. If I'm not exactly sure if it was a Sunday, but that was usually the time of the weekend that the children and the spouses would come and meet the surrogates. So here, one of like Zisha's younger son was there, and he just, Zisha asked me can you please ask him what I do? And I was like, oh, he's very young, but still I was like, okay, do you know what your mother does? And then he says that mummy pehle bhi kaam karti thi aur abhi bhi kaam kar rahi hai. My mother used to work before surrogacy, and even now she works. So, of course, we know that he's a very young boy. He might not have the idea what surrogacy is. And Zisha also, acknowledged that. But her point was that, see, even a boy as young as my son is able to recognize that what I do is work, but only the government is not recognizing. So that was the point that Zisha was trying to make. Now, interestingly, such direct assertion on the part of the surrogates that what they're doing is work was something new. Next slide, please. If we go back to the other ethnographies that have been published so far, especially Amrita Pandey is a sociologist. She was one of the first people to publish a full-fledged ethnography on Indian surrogacy industry when it was a big player in the transnational market. And her book is called Wombs in Labor, and her main project also there was to establish surrogacy as labor and surrogates as laborers. However, very early on in her work, she noted that surrogates themselves did not see what they were doing as work. Rather, they would couch it in terms of the gift they are giving to the would-be mother, or something, the punya that they are getting, something, they're doing something really, it's something good, it's a good deed that they were doing, but they would rarely talk about in terms of it being work. Now, this was something that I found to be drastically changed when I went to the field. And that had to do with the fact that when I was there around 2017, it was also the time when the bill to ban commercial surrogacy was already tabled in the parliament. Next slide, please. So if we look at the trajectory of the surrogacy regulation in India, and this is also where the ethos will come in, that how did I get onto this term. So if you look at Indian space around surrogacy, so from early 2000s, surrogacy had taken flight in India. Until 2015, it was a very, very vibrant industry in the private healthcare sector. There were some attempts throughout the years to regulate the industry, especially there were a lot of feminist women, movement around it. There's a group called Sama, if some of you know of it, in Delhi, which is a resource group which works on health and women, by Sarojini Nadipalli and Deepa Venkatachalam. So they actually have done a lot of work on surrogacy, and their group, and there was another Center for Social Research in Delhi, then Chayanika Shah, there have been a lot of activists and academicians who have been reporting on it, collecting evidence, and telling the government that we need some law around surrogacy, because it was usually the women from low socioeconomic background who would come as surrogates and egg donors. So for the longest time, since very early on since very early 2000s, there have been an attempt and a push to have a law. But what usually was done was that firstly, there were just some guidelines in 2005 that were put out, but they were not binding. So they were just some guidelines by ICMR, but doctors were free to do whatever they wanted to do. Then there were some initial versions of the assisted reproductive technology law that had come, technology bill that had come in 2008, 2008, 10, and 14. But these were again severely criticized by the feminist academicians and activists, being more towards the side of the industry and not towards the side of, say, the surrogates or the people who wanted to have children through surrogacy, or even children. There were a lot of issues around the nationality and citizenship of children who were born out of international surrogacy arrangements. So though there were efforts to bring the law around ART, but they were not successful. And in this trajectory, 2015 remains a very important year, because this was the year when a PIL was filed in the Supreme Court by a Supreme Court lawyer asking to ban surrogacy. And then the Supreme Court had asked the government, and government had gotten back saying that firstly, we are banning all the foreigners from coming. And then very next year, they, like in the affidavit, they had said in the court that very next year, we will be coming up with the law to ban commercial surrogacy altogether. Interestingly, this was also the year when, along with this one PIL by the Supreme Court lawyer, another PIL was filed, and this was filed by a group of surrogates. As soon as the government presented in the parliament that we are going to ban transnational surrogacy, like the foreign couples from coming to India, there was a group of surrogates who had petitioned against this notification of the government. However, the Supreme Court had then refused to hear this PIL. So this information I got through the lawyer who represented these surrogates back in 2015. So the courts, like Supreme Court that time, had said that we had already heard one PIL and they've asked the government to take this step. Now, whatever no PILs would be heard anymore, and only after the law comes into place, we will look into the amendments if any needed. Now, when the first version of this bill had come very next year in 2016, that is where this term ethos actually comes up. So the first version of surrogacy law said that one, that only altruistic surrogacy is allowed, meaning a woman can be a surrogate but without demanding any money for her services. Necessary medical legal expenses can be paid for. At that time, the law said that only a close relative can act as a surrogate, though the bill did not specify who the close relatives would be. And there was a lot of hue and cry around this, especially from the people, like people who actually were from the government, like BJP MLAs and MPs themselves had raised alarm. If we go back and look at the parliamentary debates of this time, that in an Indian space, this is not going to work. People rarely share about their fertility issues in families. So it's very unlikely that they'll get a family member to act as a surrogate. The other important issue was in something, so this close relative bit was later revoked, like it went through multiple iterations, multiple parliamentary standing committee and select committee report. And finally, now where the law stands, it says that any willing woman can be a surrogate. However, there was another thing that was, around the eligibility criteria of who can avail surrogacy. So from the very first version, and that is the thing that they have maintained, so even now when the bill has become a law, is that only heterosexual married couples were allowed to avail surrogacy. Now they have also added widowed women and divorced women to it, to the category of eligible people. But they have not kind of opened it up to single people, live-in couples, or same-sex people. So there was a question while this bill was being shared in a press briefing right before it was tabled in the parliament. So after it got the cabinet approval, the Union Minister Sushma Swaraj was the one who was laying out the main clauses of the bill, and she was asked actually by a journalist that why are we going back in terms of allowing people? Why can't we allow same-sex couples and live-in couples and single individuals? So that's when she had said that it might be progressive for you to allow them, but it doesn't go with our ethos. So that is where I had gotten this term from, that ultimately whose ethos got reflected in the law that finally came to be. Next, we can just go to the next slide. Yeah, even the one after this. Yes, so in my research, as I said, so this is primarily is the final version of the law that I'm looking at, but I've also looked at the entire trajectory to see that how the idea of who can avail surrogacy and how has changed over time. And as I already said, that in this interdisciplinary research, I primarily looked at this particular law from a feminist ethical lens. So the main idea behind looking at it from the ethical lens was the fact that the bill itself at various places said that what we are trying to do, and government maintained that through its press briefings, through the written notes and notifications, whatever came around it, it kept, it maintained throughout that what we are trying to do is we are not disallowing people from availing surrogacy. That is not our prerogative. What we are only doing is we are allowing ethical surrogacy to happen in the country. So there was this idea throughout these years when the bill first came in the parliament in 2016 and then ultimately became a law in 2021, that what we are trying to do, so the government maintained that what they were trying to do was to give space to ethical surrogacy and get rid of exploitative surrogacy. However, when we see that what they have done, actually the primary change that has happened is one, that of course they have disallowed a category, many people like just heterosexual married couples and divorced and widowed women from India and Indian origin are allowed. They've disallowed everyone else. But the main point of contention has been around the payment to the surrogates. So somewhere there's this idea that the main corrupting factor in surrogacy was the payment made to the surrogate. So in my research, then my main focus was to see that given there is this very clear distinction that the government has made between commercial surrogacy being always exploitative and altruistic surrogacy being the ethical surrogacy, there have been places in various press briefings where they even take away the word altruistic and they only say commercial surrogacy versus ethical surrogacy. So ethical surrogacy by default has been taken as the altruistic surrogacy. And that's where my research focused on. I wanted to analyze this claim of the government that this is the right way to go from a feminist ethical lens. And the two research questions that then I worked with were around that, was this the right way to move ahead and is it really ethical? And like I said, there was this entire trajectory of the documents, like there have been different parliamentary committee reports, there have been also a law commission report around surrogacy and different versions of the bill that I looked at along with my own field-based work. So next slide. Yeah, so one of the reasons that so my fieldwork actually was spanned like I began it right at the end of my MPhil in 2017, and then it was all across the country, all over the years. And now this multi-sightedness of my ethnographic work was not a deliberate attempt to begin with. I did not begin with thinking that I would want to go to different places and see how it is working. It actually was the need of my work. It turned out to be the only way I could work around it, because especially when the bill was in the parliament, not many people wanted to speak to me. One of the reasons that I ended up speaking to most of the surrogates from a clinic in Anand, Gujarat, run by Dr. Patel, from where I took the first anecdote, is because she was one of the very few doctors who was actually willing to speak to me. Nobody else, there were very few people who wanted to speak to me, because they felt that it was some journalistic issue. That time, a lot of this was happening. The main villain in be it the TV debates around surrogacy, or be it the parliamentary debates around surrogacy, the main villain throughout were doctors. So, but the only way I could reach surrogates and parents was through doctors, because surrogacy is still, it is a stigmatized space. So both the women who act as surrogates and the couples or individuals who avail surrogacy, it's very rare that they have either informed their extended families about their resources, or people move cities to avail surrogacy. They move city, move states. So the only way to reach these people, these parents, was through doctor, and it was very difficult to get through doctors because all these discussions that was the reason that was only I went met some doctors who then were willing to speak to me, like Dr. Patel, that I could then snowball a few more. And ultimately, next slide, I was able to speak to 50 people, which is not a very big number if you look at like how anthropological, sociological research especially is seen at in India. But I guess now the idea of ethnography and how ethnography is done is also evolving. Plus, what helped me to establish my case, even at my own institute and wherever I presented, was the fact that I also do a lot of conceptual work. But so many years and these many people, because it was actually not an easy field to get into. And I have written about it in another piece around ethnography. Now going to the care ethical section of my work. So one of the reasons that I looked at care ethics was, one, because ethical issues were at the heart of surrogacy. Second, I was introduced to care ethics while taking one course in my PhD, which was not a requirement. I just took it because I was very new to philosophy and I wanted to take, and it was an advanced level PhD course. In retrospect, I think I should not have credited it because I had a lot of, it took a lot from me, but also it gave me a space to think of, surrogacy in the light of care ethics. So when I started doing it, there was already a work by Jennifer around care ethics. So in Parks's work, which again, because she's done it in 2010, it was the time when commercial surrogacy was big in India, and that too transnational commercial surrogacy, wherein the couples would mostly come from abroad. So these either would be NRIs or foreign couples would come to India, because we had English-speaking doctors providing first-class services in private healthcare sector, but at very less price as opposed to, say, US. And then we also had cheap labor in terms of surrogates and egg donors in India. There were a lot of ethical issues in terms of surrogates not being paid the full amount that has been promised to them. There were a lot of middlemen taking money from them. At times, if they miscarried, they were not paid. So there were a lot of issues like that. So Parks was looking at one of these issues, which was around children in transnational arrangements of surrogacy. So her touch point in this particular analysis from 2010 was this case of a child who was born through surrogacy arrangement in Gujarat. Baby Man, she born, her intended parents were from Japan. Now, of
Priya.
Hello.
Hey, Priya, I think, yeah, we lost you for a couple of seconds.
Okay. I'll
So
just go
you're
back.
talking about the baby who was
Yeah,
whose parents were
baby Manju.
Jap. Huh.
Okay. Yeah. So there was this baby who was born through surrogacy in India. The surrogate was Indian, and the entire arrangement was done in India. The parents, the intended parents, who then eventually would have taken the baby, were from Japan, and it was a donor egg surrogacy, meaning the sperm which was used to create zygote was of the intended father, but the egg came from a egg donor. So what happened was, before the baby was born, the intended parents got divorced, and the mother, the would-be mother, said that I have nothing to do with the baby. My egg is not involved. I am not now married to the partner anymore, and I don't want anything to do with the baby. Now, the father came on his own to take the baby back, but Indian laws were such that they would not send, an infant, and especially a female infant, just with a male parent. And there was a legal battle that ensued, and it was only after that baby's paternal grandmother came to India and fought the case that baby was eventually sent to Japan. So this had become a huge controversial issue around how we are safeguarding the interests of the children in international surrogacy arrangements. So Jennifer Parks had taken this particular incident as the main case study in her paper and had tried to establish that if people started looking at surrogacy not just as yet another contract that they can, just break, but rather as a relationship. So that's where from care ethics. So care ethics, it's a philosophy audience, so might know already that care ethics centralizes. It's not very old. It's very young in terms of how we look at philosophical trajectory of philosophical traditions. It's a moral and political philosophy which centralizes the aspects of care and relationship, vulnerability, responsibility, etc., while speaking about the issues of ethics and justice. So Jennifer Parks had taken the relationality aspect from there and had said that if we centralize relationships in surrogacy arrangements, we might not lead into such situations. People would already realize the responsibility that they have, that they begin, that they get into right from the time when they intend to have a baby through surrogacy. Now, this idea of centralizing relationships was very, actually turned out to be in my research began from and many cases in my field was as well, especially like I've mentioned one here about Sia, who was a former surrogate. But when I went to that hospital in Anand, in Dr. Patel's hospital, she was acting as the coordinator of that particular surrogacy hostel, which was being run in the basement of that hospital. And after a few years, because I kept going, it was a longitudinal kind of study, I kept going to the same place. So after a few years, I went and I saw that then she had become the receptionist of the same hospital. So she began as a surrogate and then, had this upward mobility, which was there in her mind, that she said that this mobility that she saw was because of two reasons. One, that she was in continuous touch with the clinic, and there are a lot of women like me who have benefited from this continued relationship with the clinic. And second thing, that what made her entire journey of surrogacy much more fulfilling was the fact that she was still in touch with the people for whom she had delivered a surrogate baby. And she said that a lot of women like her, where intended parents have themselves decided to be in touch with the surrogates, have found the relationships and the entire experience of surrogacy more fulfilling. There was another twist to Sia's tale, and that was that the same couple had another surrogate baby through another surrogate from Hyderabad, and they chose not to be in touch with her. So Sia kind of, added Sia's moral worth, because she's like, see, they are not in touch with her because she was a greedy woman, and I have never demanded anything else. So whenever they come to India, they call me, give me flight tickets, and they come and meet me. So the continued relationship with the parents and with the hospital, both when Jennifer Parks's analysis and of relationships, when I had to look at relationships right from the field, really was that most of the times, to be in touch or not was the decision of the parents. So no matter how much surrogates wanted to be in touch, if the parents didn't want them to be in touch with the children or with them over the, as over the growing up years of the child, then they couldn't do anything. So though Jennifer Parks's work is very important and highlighting relationships in this entire scene is very important, but what I realized is that ball is still in the court of the parents. And there was something else also happening here. Next slide, please. So, yeah, we can just move ahead. Yeah, yes. So there was something else also happening here, and which was that, yes, this one. So there was something else also happening here, and which was that it was not just, the ethical issues were not only because there was some caring aspect that was missing from, say, the side of the hospital or the parents, which was there and which was praised by a lot of feminist activists and academicians. But I realized, and this was my hypothesis when I began the research, that the way the government is also understanding what a surrogate is doing, what is her position in this entire surrogacy arrangement, there was something ethically misplaced there, and that is why the way they were thinking that, okay, to make surrogacy more ethical, let's not pay the surrogates, only then the women who really want to do it out of their own hearts will and for altruistic purposes will come and all issues will be resolved, which was very different than what I found the surrogates speaking on the field. They said that for us to be a surrogate in the first place, this is a very big decision. It's not a natural pregnancy. In India, the kind of surrogacy which is now mandated by law, and even before the law came into place, even when it was just a bill in the parliament, even when it was not the bill, for the many years, for like almost all the years, the kind of surrogacy that was taking place in India mostly was traditional surrogacy, meaning that sorry, not traditional, was gestational surrogacy, meaning that the surrogate was only gestating the baby, but did not give her egg in the process. So the baby that she was carrying at the end of the day was the zygote was prepared in a lab, and her egg was not used in the process. If her egg could be used, the process could have been little simpler, because then she only had to be artificially inseminated by the sperm of the would-be father of the baby. And that's what also surrogates said, that by law you're mandating us to only go through IVF. We can't use our own eggs, and we are okay with that. But then it makes the process even more invasive. Nothing is changing for us. We are still going through the same IVF process. We are still carrying the baby for those many months. We are going through the same physical and mental turmoil. But doctors are paid in the same way. Lawyers are getting paid in the same way like they were before. Psychologists are getting paid in the same way. Even the hostel coordinators who are looking after us are getting paid in the same way. Just us, the surrogates are expected to not get paid for this. And that is what they found, unethical. That was very different from what government was trying to portray. So earlier it was just a hypothesis that maybe government has a very different idea, like the people behind the bill. But then came the select committee report, the last report in the parliament on this bill, on the basis of which the final law came into play. And it was very interesting to see how this particular report looks at the idea of altruistic surrogacy. So I've taken some excerpts from this report, and it came in 2020, so it was towards the end of my PhD. So they have taken few excerpts from here. So one is in this place here, while defining altruistic surrogacy, the report says that it is based on care and concern which has no space or scope for monetary compensation. On the next page, it says why it is most acceptable. It says that it is the highest level of noble act that a woman can do as a surrogate. It also sees surrogates as crusaders against infertility, who are out to abolish the stigma of fertility from the society by being so caring and concerning about the intended parents that they'll do it without expecting any money. And by this, they are projecting a model of projecting an ideal of being a model woman. That's what model, normal, selfless women do. And in the next page, they also somewhere said that if we give money to these women, we'll be taking away the sanctity of motherhood. And throughout this report, they've called surrogates the ideal women, the noble mothers, the divine entities who are doing all of this out of care, Now this kind of really, and then I could connect it with care ethics, because it was like that, okay, what care ethics has tried to do for many years is to de-link the reduction of care only to affect and point out its labor aspects. And that is what I realized here, that what is being done is it's just going back to the idea of care where it is in the sentimentalized sacrificial space. And that is what is being expected from the surrogates. So the next slide tells us that at this stage is where I brought in some care ethicists, Sarah Ruddick and Joan Tronto. Some of you might know of their work. There's a paper that has come out, especially around these two scholars and their application in my work in Hypatia, which I've co-authored with one of my supervisors, Amrita Banerjee. And that was the paper which was sent along the email that you might have received. So in Ruddick and Tronto's both, they're both. So Ruddick was a philosopher. Sarah Ruddick was a philosopher. Joan Tronto is a political scientist. But that has been the nature of care ethics as a field. That even Carol Gilligan, who was the first, who's seen as the initial people, or Beat Nell Noddings, they all came from different spaces. Somebody came from psychology, somebody from education. Sarah Ruddick is a philosopher, and Joan Tronto is a political scientist. So care ethics itself has been a very interdisciplinary field. So I took these two scholars and just quickly shed light on what were the two main points that I took from them. So Ruddick's idea in the next page, Ruddick's book, which is around maternal thinking, which is called Maternal Thinking, was around the fact that care is a rational activity. It leads to certain, when we are engaged in a practice of care, and she takes mothering as the symbolic act of care in her work, her idea was that it does lead to certain unique epistemologies, and that's the women, the people who are engaged in caring work. It's not just they're just doing it out of sheer natural instincts or sentiments, but it actually requires you to make judgments for around the kind of work you are doing. Joan Tronto, in her work, Moral Boundaries in 1993, and then later in her latest book, in Democracy in 2013, has maintained that care is both disposition and practice, and it has various phases to it. And again, try to establish that care as it's not reduced to just affect, but has labor component in it. This actually then helped me to kind of lay out that what surrogates were doing, though it was very much rooted in effect, because at the end of the day, they're like, we're doing it for our own children, we do it for these women also, for we are doing it, but at the end of the day, what we are doing is a form of labor. And in the next page. Yeah, I think we just moved. Yeah, so this one here. So what ultimately in my first, this was called the surrogate work, where they firstly have to decide that, okay, we're getting into this, and that's what they said, that when we get into this, Priya, we know what we are getting into. So for state to think that we are some passive victims who people come and just trample upon is a very, it's a very naive understanding of what we do. So we know what we are getting into. The kind of labors, and they, so of course this word epistemic labor was given later in the research, and this actually goes back to Professor Banerjee's intervention into my work. But what the surrogates were trying to say, that there is a labor which has been totally negated by the state, by just saying that for them the labor then they put in was not seen because they were not being paid. And it's in the work that has come out in Hypatia, and later also in my thesis, even today, the kind of work I've continued in around surrogacy from ethics has looked at this question of labor, and that how this labor has been totally negated by the state, and that's where certain problems also come in. And let's just go to I'll tell you where to stop, Varun. You keep moving because I'm being conscious of the time now. Yeah, I'll just, I'll just finish up. Like, yeah, it's okay. We can just stop here. Now, one of the main objections that could come to the work, and that is what I deal with towards the end of my thesis as well, was from two places. One is this international Stop Surrogacy campaign, which is run by a section of radical feminists, which say that, surrogacy is nothing but sexual slavery. And what we are doing is taking children away from men, like mothers to someone, and that is the ultimate topic. We get from because it tells that most radicals and traumas work deal with reduction or like reproductive technology, but one can take work that care the kind of work that surrogates put in is care work, also has a component of labor, and Radik also said about her work around mothering, that mothering is something that can be very easily, like, a birth mother is not necessarily, okay, do I have to stop?
Priya,
Yeah.
your voice, sorry, the audio has crackled up and we couldn't
Okay.
hear you in the last 1 minute.
Okay. No, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, seems fine. Can you say something?
Yes. So is it okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you, but now Varun seems to be missing. But yeah, I think you should go on.
Oh, sorry, I think it was on my side. Yeah.
No, even I couldn't. I mean, her voice was breaking earlier, but now it seems fine.
Okay, fine, Priya, go.
It's okay. We'll come back to some parts of it in Q&A. I just wanted to kind of lay out towards the end that there has been this critique of surrogacy from the feminists, like from a section of radical feminists who think that it is taking away the babies from the birth mothers, which surrogates themselves in their testimony we can see is being negated. The other idea that altruistic surrogacy is the only way to go ahead is something which can be critiqued from Joan Tronto's ideas also around care, because she says that altruism, when we look at care as an altruistic activity, we imbue power into it, because not every who gets to be altruistic is the question that she asks, and that is a very good question that surrogates also raise. That who decides for us that we are altruistic, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to be paid for this. Interestingly, the last bit. Let's go. Let's go to. I'll tell you where to. Yeah. Let's just. Yeah, this question of caste. I would just end with here, because there's very interesting critique that has come from a section of Dalit feminists. So there was this paper that had come out in EPW in 2020 by Mohan Rao and Joanna Gondwin and Suruchi Thapar, who had interviewed Dalit feminists, like the women who identified as Dalit feminists, who were academicians, journalists, and activists around the question of surrogacy and sex work. So these women were very clear that sex work and surrogacy can never be seen as work, because the women who actually get to do it at the end of the day are mired in a great structural oppression, and they look at it through the reproductive justice lens, and they say that reproductive justice tells us to not just look at choice one is being making, but also if that reproductive choice is being made in a just environment. Now, this was something that I ended my research with, and then I've written a bit more on it later. But this is where I would really, and of course throughout, but this is also where I would really seek feedback, because when I go back to the field and when I also look at my own analysis, I feel that by saying that there is no agency whatsoever, because women are under so much structural oppression that they have to choose surrogacy, somehow it feels that then we are taking any agency which is there away from them. And that is something which I try to establish through ethical perspective, that there is still, epistemic agency which is there, and there is embodied agency which the surrogates are, asserting. However, through this particular lens, where they say, but then when we bring in the caste question, there is no agency whatsoever. It is somewhere where I, finished my thesis, and I've written a bit more on that. But and I understand that they have brought in reproductive justice lens here, but then there have been some other work, especially by Sophie Lewis in STS space, which looks at reproductive justice and then say that through reproductive justice lens, not seeing any agency in these women, no matter which circumstances they are in, is actually reducing them to passive victims. And that is where I am in terms of my research right now. Thank you, everyone. And Sorry for the rushed pace and for the technical glitches, but thank you, Varun, for being with me throughout.
I'm glad, and I think handling the slides like this also made me pay very detailed attention to all of this. So it was helpful in that sense. Thank you, Priya, for this lovely presentation. Great work, fascinating work, which tries to draw from anthropology and philosophy at the same time. So the floor is open for questions, discussions, and yeah, Krishna is always our first question person.
Yeah, thank you. I really liked your presentation. I learned a lot. This is very new for me. I just have a couple of comments slash questions. I mean, just loose thoughts that came to my head. One is, I mean, this is like a comment. It would be beneficial maybe for a audience who doesn't know this to talk about different kinds of surrogacy in the beginning, because you said what surrogacy, you talked about surrogacy, but I would have liked some kind of a either a definition or what you understand by surrogacy, because different kinds of surrogacy may raise different kinds of ethical problems. So, for example, if it's just a carrier of sperm or a zygote which is produced, which is sourced from two other people, or whether the egg is from the woman, and that would present a different kind of problem, I'm presuming ethical problem, because if it is the surrogate's egg and the sperm is somebody else's, then the kinds of rights and issues that may come up may be different than if she's just a carrier. And so it would have helped if you could have maybe talked about different kinds of surrogacy, or maybe or maybe just focus on one kind of surrogacy if that's what you're talking about. The second question I had was, I was wondering why care ethics is a good model to talk about it, and not say some other kind of model, which should be a liberal model or a model of rights. Yeah, maybe some discussion about that would also help. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Sorry, this is my just kid who's just sorry about this. Yeah, continue. Yeah.
Not at all. It's a caring space.
Yeah.
So yeah. No, thank you, Krishna. That's all on me, because I actually had taken that out from here, which usually is a part of my presentation, because I had recently presented at another space, which was around where people knew who were reproductive ethics kind of audience. So that is all on me. I always have those slides, and I should have had those slides where I initially lay out that what is surrogacy and what are the different kinds of surrogacy. So surrogacy is usually, I did speak a bit about that throughout, but to kind of just clarify, surrogacy is usually divided on the basis of divided at two levels. One is on the basis of genetic connection to the child, and another is on the basis of the monetary component for the services of the surrogate. So in the first kind of division, which is on the basis of the genetic connection to the child, a surrogacy is either seen as a traditional surrogacy or a gestational surrogacy. Traditional is when a surrogate's own egg is being used in the process. So here only the sperm is, she's just artificially inseminated. And the child that she carries eventually, she is genetically related to the child. So her egg is part of the process. There's no extra IVF that takes place. It's just through artificial insemination that she gets pregnant, carries the child, and gives it to the intended parents from where the sperm had come. That is one kind of surrogacy, which has not been the most frequent kind of surrogacy in India ever since the surrogacy took flight in India. The kind of surrogacy that had been frequent and now is mandated by law is gestational surrogacy, where the surrogate is not allowed to contribute her egg in the process. So by mandate now, the egg and sperm either both have to come from the parents. Like earlier, the law said both have to come from parents, but then there was some petition in the court, and now it says, okay, one of the gametes can be donor gametes. but still the surrogate cannot be the genetic mother. So that kind of gestational surrogacy is the form of surrogacy now in India. And on the other level, the kind of division which is there is between commercial and altruistic, wherein if a surrogate is paid only for the necessary medical, legal expenses in the process, it's altruistic, where it is presumed that she's doing it out, altruistically without any monetary benefits. So nothing is paid for her services, as opposed to what is called as commercial surrogacy, which now the people who support that have said that it should rather be called as a compensated surrogacy rather than commercial, to remove the negative connotation. And here the surrogate is supposed to be paid. And that is something in my own research also towards the end that I tilted towards, that a surrogate has to be paid. Altruistic is not going to solve the problems which the government initially began this bill with. So the initial statements of objectives and reasons in the first version of the bill said that we are doing this to get rid of the exploitation in the industry, which was there. There have been a lot of activist and academician input into it. The evidence has been there. But the resolution that the state provided was just to take away the monetary component from the surrogates, and there were some other measures also. So the kind of surrogacy that was the most frequent in India was gestational commercial. Now gestational has been made mandatory by law, and commercial has been prohibited by law. So now it's gestational altruistic, which is there, which then raises a lot of other issues, that when the government says these some other things that are there in the law, that you cannot advertise for surrogates, neither the doctors nor the intended couples, then where do surrogates come from? So they still are going back to the agents. Like it is all now gone under the radar, because now you cannot have agents formally. Earlier they were surrogacy agencies and it was a normal business. Now it has kind of gone underground, because you cannot advertise for surrogates. But where do surrogates come from? So either there are poorer relatives or there are household helps, and then there is a promise of money. But if they do not keep that promise, surrogates cannot hold them liable, because they're not supposed to be paying them in the first place. So these are the kind of issues that come up with the current law. And the care ethics part of it is like, you're right, there can be various ways to look at it. But reproductive rights perspective has been already, used and criticized by feminist scholars around surrogacy, because it says that, it only looks at surrogacy either as totally right or as totally wrong. So there have been these two traditional philosophical models, where either you just say that everything is right because these are consenting adults, independent adults, autonomous agents entering into a contract. So that has been seen under the liberal framework. On the other end, there have been this exploitation model, which says that, oh no, this can never be right because you're commercializing, commodifying a woman's body. Now there has been a central position that has been put in by scholars through different lenses. Reproductive justice lens is one of them, and ethical lens is another, where they say that look at the context, and then see, of course, it is true that there can be exploitation, and it is also true that they are adult parties. But then centralizing the vulnerability which still remains, putting the responsibility where it has to be, and then also looking at relationships, that's where care ethics helps. The other thing is that when I said, sorry, okay.
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So the other thing is that it was also a strategic move, because when I looked at the report carefully, I saw care appearing a lot of times, and the way care was being understood in in the select committee report, which was the basis of the final law that came out, was centering a lot what surrogate is doing around the fact that she is doing an act of care, and this act of care can never be put a monetary value to. And that is where I thought that care ethics could help, because care ethics, the main central task of care ethics has been to take care out of the private space and lay out its other aspects, which are not just reduced to concern is and effect does remain part of care, but it has other facets also, which somehow I felt that the way state was looking at surrogate's position and moral identity, they were totally negated.
Just a quick follow-up. I mean, do you think that whatever concerns you had about exploitation or structural issues cannot be, you think it cannot be addressed through a framework that looks at rights rather than looking at it through a feminist care lens?
No, it can be if we look at not just through the lens of rights, Krishna, but reproductive justice. So there has been this debate between reproductive rights and reproductive justice in this space, like not just surrogacy, but the space of reproductive health for some time, wherein it has been kind of critiqued that when we just look at rights, somehow we might be negating the overall structural oppression that can be happening. So reproductive justice has been put forth as the framework, and I go back to reproductive justice framework towards the end of my work, wherein I bring care ethics in conversation with reproductive rights through the reproductive justice lens, wherein rights, of course, are being talked about, but there has been this focus on the overall structural and systemic issues. Now, I see your question is that does right model do, like, is rights model not doing that? Now, that is, I think, a more or less settled debate in reproductive ethics space that we need to move towards reproductive justice argument, because they're looking at rights framework as autonomy and choice in these issues devoid of context has been the
Okay.
negation on the rights perspective, feminist liberal perspective.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you.
Yeah, Krishna, if you have further questions, you can join back. Priya, a follow-up question to your conversation with Krishna. So I do see that, like, say, care ethics, and it's also a clarificatory question. Care ethics is bringing in you're using care ethics to solve a particular problem here. I mean, like, going by the slides and your response to Krishna, it looks like care ethics, you picked up care ethics in order to solve certain moral issues the surrogate mother faces in that sense. Given that she is providing care to the kid in the womb and all of those, this one, she has to be taken. I mean, since she is providing care, it also needs to be understood as a form of a labor and few other aspects that follows from that perspective. What I was trying to think through was that, like, say, would the surrogate mother recognize that she's providing care to the infant? What is the name for it? The kid in the womb. What do they usually call it? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It is called surrogate baby. They just call it surrogate baby. Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. So, but the thing is, this kind of care, now we also have to now start identifying what kind of care it is, right? Like, say, for example, the care a parent provides to a kid growing up. I mean, outside. I mean, like, say, for example, born kid in that sense. That is a very different kind of a care than this kind of a care, where in fact, this kind of a care is more also of taking care of the pregnant mother is taking care of herself in that sense. So we're just trying to look through that, like, say, these two kinds of care are very different, and how would care ethics work here in that sense? Because also what the larger question through which why I'm asking this is because also pushing the surrogate mother to a point that no, you should care for the kid in the womb, the baby in the womb. It's also a kind of a pressure. I mean, probably some of the surrogate mothers are just looking at it as, like, say, I've taken up this labor job, I want to do this and move out of it. I don't want to have the emotional labor of feeling something towards this or any of those things. So I feel both the sides here, whereas understanding this as a care is also a kind of a pressurizing situation. So how do you navigate this?
Yes, no, thank you, Varun. That's a very good question. So the way, firstly, very clearly, as you pointed out, there's a certain kind of care that is given to the child after the child is born, and that's where adoptive care becomes very important. So, for example, Sarah Ruddick in her work says that all parents are adoptive. because it's only after the child has come out that they realize, okay, what they've gotten themselves into, and then another kind of care is brought into the picture. And that is one of the reasons that Radik also says that all kinds of mothering is adoptive at the end of the day, but it does not take away from the fact that there was someone who initially, gestated this baby, and only because that person provided that care for that long, that there could be a child to be cared for by the social parents later. Now it is like dependent both ways. Like if there were no one to take care of that baby, and the surrogate is, kind of delivering a baby when there is no one to take care of course, her responsibility, like one can say, but she's done with her responsibility. But of course, there has to be, there has to be a connecting, party which takes care of the baby if the birthing mother does not want to take care of the baby. And similarly, the social parents have, there can be no way they can deny the contribution of the birthing mother. So there's these two kinds of cares, you're very right, are very different kinds, there are the two kinds of care. But the other part where you said that there can be this pressure also on women to care for the child, and that is one of the spaces wherein there is this tussle that a surrogate mother goes through, because when the idea is that, oh, you become a surrogate, but you become an altruistic surrogate and take care of the baby like you would take care of the baby as your own child. Surrogate would come back and say that, of course, that's what, they are actually trained and primed by the hospital. That this is, so there is this interesting work by anthropologist Kalindi Vora, again from in one of the clinics in India, that the way the doctors create that space for women, like surrogate women, to feel that and then a guest baby came, and like you would take care of any guest coming to your house. It's just you're taking care of the baby for the time being, and then the baby goes away. So you be primed from the very beginning that you're not going to stay with this, like this baby is not going to stay with you. So these are different strategies used by the clinics and other things, which was seen as, again, exploitative and a pressure on the women, that at the end of the day, you are making them first get attached to the baby, saying that, oh, please take care of them like you would have taken care of any other baby who comes to your house, but also at the same time, don't get attached. Now, this entire turmoil that the surrogate goes through is, in my work, then is seen as a kind of labor that she puts in. And this labor is seen as a part of the larger idea of care that the surrogate is giving, not just to the baby, but towards herself and towards maybe her own children who are alive for whom she's doing it. Because see, by mandate, a surrogate, even before the law came into place, a surrogate was always a married woman with a child of her own. That was the kind of proof that, oh, she can bear a healthy child. And most of the time, surrogates were doing it for their families, which can then be again seen as a pressure that they are under. That, oh, you have to do surrogacy to take care of your own children, to get a house, to do all of that. But these all tussles and trials and tribulations can be seen as a part of a care, where we do not see care only always as something which always has positive connotation attached to it. Care also means these conflicting needs that you have to weigh and then work across. Care can also be a paternalistic care by the doctor in some case. And here the state is also trying to care for the surrogates, right? State is also saying that we are caring for the surrogates, we are taking them out of exploitative space. So care can have many connotations, but in the surrogates context, like you rightly said, even to take care of the baby could be a pressure situation, and that's what could be countered by saying that care can have various facets. A surrogate is not just a caregiver, but she should also be a care receiver. That is one of the contributions of Joan Tronto in her various phases of care that she talks about when she says what care is composed of. And when surrogate is seen as someone who also has to be cared for, I think the idea is to go back and listen to these women. And their idea of being cared for is take care of the middlemen who take money out from us, take care of the obstetric violence that at times we have to face, because there can be situations, there have been situations where normal delivery could happen, but they necessarily had to go through C-section because the time had to be matched with when the intended parents were flying down to India or to that city. So there were a lot of these other issues that surrogates flagged, or at times when they miscarry, they are not paid. If they have twins, they are paid more. A lot of these things. So the surrogate said that there are lots of other spaces where we want to be, taken care of. And care ethics helps us to see someone as not a fixed entity. So we can be, receiving care at one point, we can be giving care at another point, but care remains foundational in our life throughout is what care ethics tells us. And it can have various aspects to it, which are not always positive. So that is part of my analysis. Yeah, but it's a very good question, and I'll take it up. And also the reproductive rights and justice, that kind of debate, reproductive rights and care ethics debate is also another one that I am looking at. But if anyone has any question and any feedback on resolving the agency bit, where a section of Dalit feminists are saying that there can be no agency, and they say that sex work cannot also be seen as work at all. But there, my argument so far, and you people can please tell me, give me feedback how I can make that stronger. My argument has been that when you even look at the sex workers networks in India, and again, they at times do not feel, at times it is said that the Dalit feminists, the section of Dalit feminists who say that given these women come from a particular caste location can never have agency, for women who are in these professions, be it sex work or surrogacy, they feel that the women who are speaking for us come from a very different social location. So they might share the same caste identity, but they are from a very social location. So listen to us rather than if we think it's work, it is work. So that is one of the ways I'm looking at it. And also that how we can never take agency totally out from the relationships which are also oppressive. But if you have any other suggestions for me to resolve this debate, that will be really helpful.
I have some thoughts, but I'll wait. I mean, it's a kind of a follow-up question, but I'll join back the queue in that sense. Anyone else has thoughts on what Priya asked, or you guys want to ask any question to Priya? So, okay, by the time they warm up or they have the time to ask the question, Priya, I also think, okay, I may not be directly responding to the question that you just raised right now, but I think what I'm going to point out has some implication, probably a indirect way to this. But I think one of the aspects that is probably very central for your work, given that you're looking at it from both anthropology and philosophy point of perspective, is that, like, say, there is a kind of a tension between how anthropology looks at ethics and how philosophy looks at ethics, right? And I can see some elements of that in this work as well. I mean, like how both of them are, because of their perspective, are raising different kinds of question, even though it may be about care, for example. So, for example, I mean, like one way of characterizing these two perspectives might be that, like, say, moral philosophy by default is normative. In the sense, it says what should be the norm. On the other side, on the other side, you see anthropology, which is more interested in what other people think and let the ideas come from in that sense. Like, say, let us go and speak to the surrogate mother and see what kind of the way she is thinking through it, rather than thinking in a very abstract way and figuring out what should be the way out of this. And both of these aspects are, in fact, illuminating at places and contexts at the same time. But at the same time, when you take a particular situation, it may conflict. Like, say, for example, a normative philosopher might say, why? I mean, a woman should not ever enroll for a surrogacy in that sense. It is a very wrong act. I mean, it's a very prescriptive, normative position to have. Contrast to, like, there are so many socio-political, economic conditions because of which the women would, in fact, want to avail for surrogacy. So why I'm sort of pointing it out is that, like, say, how do you navigate this kind of a conflict? And at the same time, the situation of the Dalit thing that you pointed out, if I have to use that in this context, like, say, it may point out that, like, say, some people might are already in that situation, and because of which we may have to theorize certain things. but at the same time, don't go for surrogacy at all, and all of those things might be coming from a different context, and I don't know how it is going to help here. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that, like, say, given these two different perspectives of normative versus situational, might be the key in answering this. I don't know. I mean, I'm just sort of pointing it out. So yeah.
Yeah, no, before I go to Krishna's question, no, thank you, Varun. And that is, there has been a continuous tension between the two disciplinary spaces also that I'm trying to amalgamate in my work. But I guess that's also where like care ethics has proven to be slightly, like not slightly, like not in Indian context because not many people are doing it here. But when I go out and present and speak to people, that's where I realize that care ethics has been a space in feminist philosophy where there has been a lot of, space given to the empirical from the ethics, moral, political philosophy framework. So I'm still trying to see if I can keep doing that. But I also see the caveats in this because there can be some tensions which can never be resolved. There will always be different perspectives maybe coming from the field and the way we are theorizing it. But I guess when it comes to certain things like, say, you're mandating something, you have a law around something, I think it becomes imperative to go and check with the people for whom the law is being brought out. And when the question is around the ethics of a practice and you're trying to resolve an exploitation-based question, I think going back to people for whom it was meant is very useful. And now I think, again, when I restart my field work, now, of course, the surrogacy board has already been in place. Surrogacy has restarted, though the Act came in 2021, but there was a limbo because there were no there had to be some sort of state and national boards to be set up, which were not set up for the longest time. Now they have, and now the surrogacy has restarted. So it will be interesting to see where these women are coming from, and now what is their motivation for this, and are they being paid at all? Doctors did hint to me last time when I spoke with them towards the end of my PhD that, and in my postdoc also, that we are trying to find ways to still pay the surrogate in the ambit of law. How they are doing it is something that has to be seen, but also where these women are coming from and what are the new ethical issues that might be now raised when we think that a large part of it has been taken care of. At least the state thinks so.
Krishna, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi. Now, you were talking about the criticisms that Dalit feminists bring about. I was also thinking about it, how to kind of block it. And this is just some loose thoughts. On the face of it, it looks a bit counterintuitive to say that they have no agency. Because, for one, it looks like they would have agency if not in relation. Okay, their argument is, I suppose they don't have agency vis-a-vis the larger discursive structures that may exist. But I don't think that entails that they don't have agency, let's say, even among themselves. So I don't think the blanket statement that they have no agency really holds. You can say they don't have agency relative to a particular institution or particular structure, but I don't know if it's all the way so fine-grained that they are completely without agency. And I think that is, it's counterintuitive. The second thing is the agency. They have agency insofar as they are able to recognize a sense of injustice, right? And that's a paradigm that some people have talked about as well. Their ability to recognize injustice is evidence of their agency. Now, maybe they are, and I think that is also the feeling of injustice or the feeling of losing self-dignity. They may not be able to articulate it, right? They may not be able to articulate it in ways because, if Dalit feminists are right and all the concepts are kind of all top down and they don't know what to do and how to say it, but they can say it. They can feel it. And so there's some kind of experience of injustice which shows agency. So I don't think that's true either. And the third point I was thinking was, which goes back to the earlier one, which is that they have agency among themselves, and then they have, if at all, they have limited agency vis-a-vis some structures, but some other structures they might have more agency. So it depends on what it is that we're talking about. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I was thinking about this.
Yeah. And thank you, Siddharth. I think he just left, but thank you so much. I think that's a very good point. And I'm like, of course, I'm still writing on it, so I'm going to acknowledge you people, acknowledge the IP and your thoughts. But this is really useful that just to be able to recognize, because they do recognize what is wrong, and they are pointing out that these are things which are wrong, for which we were hoping that whatever law comes in, because everyone wanted a law to be there, even surrogates wanted a law to be there because they knew things were not right. And there have been unfortunate instances of deaths of egg donors and surrogates at times because of repeat, say, harvesting of eggs in egg donors and repeat attempts. Because see, that is another point, and I'll add that to the issue whenever I present next. IVF surrogacy does not have a very high success rate. So a lot of times the process has to be repeated more than once. Embryos also, the implantation of embryos do also take more than one attempt. So they do recognize that there have been some things which are wrong, and government, like the law, also has taken care of few things out of this. How many times a surrogate can be a surrogate, how many embryos could be implanted in one time, and all of that. But yeah, I think it's a great point that to be able to recognize injustice is also, and shows an agency, and it has agentic potential.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they're able to recognize, because otherwise, then there can be no form of, no change is possible. And that's again, not, I don't think they would admit that either, because if Dalit feminists are talking about wanting to change as well, they have to admit some kind of moral change, and that can only come from some recognition.
A section of Dalit feminists, like not all Dalit feminists are on set.
But But again, I think if they would undermine themselves if they say there is no agency such that it's completely deterministic. Structurally determined, as it were. I don't think that's a plausible view. Anyway, that's my view. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Priya, for spending the Saturday with us and sharing your thoughts. Very fascinating, and I'm sure.
Yeah, I think there is a question in the chat, Varun, or somebody is wanting to ask a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see. Sorry. Yeah, Meenakshi, please go ahead. I didn't see the chat. Yeah.
Sorry, I did not know if we were.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not from philosophy, so I do not know if this fits into the space. So I was wondering about cultural narratives of surrogacy as such. And well, if you look at it from, say, racial studies of surrogacy, especially in the African American space, a lot of it comes down from, a biblical narrative of an Egyptian slave wanting to be a surrogate, right? And I was wondering if there are cultural narratives like this that exist over here, which might give these surrogates a model of their bodies that is different from the medical model as such. So instead of looking at themselves as gestational carriers, which is the biomedical and the legal term, would there be a different way for them to look at themselves, which would, then sort of also change the care ethics dynamics a bit, because then they are not really an object that is, the subject of institutional discourses. But then I'm not sure if that will affect the way they see altruism itself when you look at yourself as some sort of a divine the agent of sorts falling into a cultural narrative. So I do not know if a cultural narrative like this exists as such, but it is something that comes to us, in a specific Western model. Though everything that we're speaking about right now is also a very Western biomedical model, right? Where we look at the body as something that is an instrument for medicine itself, and you look at the woman's body as something that the medical institution can use to foster, say, reproductiveness hood in women, rather than the women themselves having a lot of agency over their bodies, etc. So I'm wondering if there is some kind of a cultural narrative that you found out in your ethnographic journey so far.
Yes, thank you, Meenakshi. Why it is surrogacy in India. So just switch off. Yeah, I think now I should get it. So there is cultural, there's going back to the culture and scripture. So there have been times when surrogates have put the doctor into a divine pedestal and said that, Dr. Madam is like a god for us. She's doing so much and we are able to do all of this. At times, surrogates themselves have been seen as divine creatures. And it has gone, there have been, in my own field work, say lawyers and doctors, going back to some stories in Mahabharata. I'm forgetting it was the Rohini story. I get back on that. But there's some stories there that there was, our sages knew how to, transfer an embryo to another womb. And it is just a continuation of that. We've had this in our culture here. And that's why it is okay to do it. But then they go back to saying that given we have had such rich history around it, where women have always shared the load of mothering and had communal mothering spaces and all of that, that it should be okay for women to be surrogates without expecting money for it. So there have been this going back to scriptures and going back to, and this is very interesting, because you brought up African American context, that one of the critiques of banning surrogacy has also been that, even in that space, because it's not just in India, it's an overall debate against commercial surrogacy. One of the critiques have come from African American scholars who say that we've always had communal mothering and surrogacy is just an extension of that. And women should be paid for this, because though they would do it otherwise because it was a communal thing, but if they have to go through IVF, why not just pay them? So there has been that kind of aspect also. But like I said, in Indian case, I'm forgetting which was the Rohini story, but there has been these stories, and whichever book you like pick up, or whenever you are in these debates around, especially in the present regime, they do go back to for everything, be it stem cell, be it IVF, be it plastic surgery, that we always had everything here in Vedas and in our epics and everything. So they go back to that. But surrogates also at times take inspiration from that we are gaining some punya out of what we are doing. Paap nahi kar rahe, punya kar rahe, but they are very clear that we know it is punya, but we deserve to be paid for it. And that has been a very clear narrative that I've found in surrogates.
Thank you.
Any further questions? So if not, yes, thank you, Priya, for again spending the time with us on Saturday.
Thank you.
And yeah, and also lovely, like very interesting conversations, I feel. So hope to take this further sometime, probably whenever you're working on something else, you can present it here and share with us. Okay, thanks a lot, and hope to
Thank you.
take this forward.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. And
Yes,
thank you for your feedback. Please get back to me for any more feedback.
definitely.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
then.
you, Varun. Thank you.
Yeah, have a nice weekend.
Have a nice
Bye.
weekend. Bye. Bye, everyone.